Howdy, kids. It's Held Captain Media again. You probably haven't seen a video like this in a minute, or maybe you have. Maybe this is coming out later. I don't know when this is going to exist, but
weird time stuff.
Yeah. Who cares? Because today, right now, we're going over Fantastic Four fan theories. Now, this is for what the plot's going to be, who's going to be cast, all that stuff in the upcoming Marvel Fantastic Four film. Now, I believe that it's going to be announced at D23. Maybe it already has been, but regardless, we're going to go off of these fan theories, what people think are going to happen based on what the MCU has, essentially hinted at. All right, Zane. So this first one's called the blip theory.
Okay.
So at the time of Infinity War, there was a group up at a space station. And why would you know that in reference to Marvel, right? Like, why would you even be thinking of that? But it was the summertime in the movie, so you might also be asking a question like, why was Peter Parker on a bus on his way somewhere? Maybe to see a space shuttle take off. Maybe said space shuttle that takes off was the Fantastic Four. And at the time of the snap, just remember this. When Thanos snapped in Endgame, they said a massive amount of radiation remanated around the planet that he snapped at. So who's to say that he didn't snap while these people were in space and then they were radiated by the snap from his finger, thus turning them into the Fantastic Four?
Huh. That's an interesting kind of cause and effect.
They used the blip to go into quarantine and act like they were blipped away as well in order to try to take the time for Mr. Fantastic to teach them how to use their powers in practice. Only for when the movie to come out, Johnny finally breaks out, being egg-headed, saying, why should we have to hide our powers? We should be helping the Earth. And that's when the Fantastic Four is introduced. Because they also said in this movie that Fantastic Four will definitively not just be an origin story.
Thankfully. I feel like a lot of people are so burned out on the hero origin story at this point. We're already built so heavily into this world where it's like, okay, we get there are superheroes here. Yeah, if it's a more obscure one like Miss Marvel or something, we got to have a little bit of understanding. How did she get here or whatever? Who is the character? But like a monolith like Fantastic Four. Same way with
extra
like
interesting little nugget on this theory. Doctor Doom was gone in the snap. Like, he did disappear. And then he came back. And that's why around this time of relevancy, he's becoming the villain that he is.
So they're going to do another Doctor Doom?
They have to, of course. They have to. It's literally in the genesis of the characters. They have to.
I know. Doctor Doom is such an incredible villain.
That he will, and people think he's going to show up having post blip appeared in Wakanda. People actually think he's going to be in Black Panther, but we'll see. I doubt it, but we'll see.
Huh. I'm curious about that, but I do want, like, there are cool other Fantastic Four villains.
Okay, but the villain aside, what do you think of that as the story?
That is an interesting start to it.
It also brings a point of like why Rocket meant to point out that radiation covered that other planet. Like, it does more than just highlight like, oh, that's how we know where Thanos is. It's almost like double layered. Like, it's like letting you know, like, when the snap happens, the planet around the area in which it was snapped has an experiences a high amount of radiation.
Yeah. And it does give a good like reasoning for the storm and everything, like the weird cosmic like reality changing forces within the Infinity Gauntlet, giving them their kind of very varied powers, and it all being based around like all the things that they're trying to do throughout. So it's an interesting way to tell that story. I don't know. I'm not a huge Fantastic Four fan. I don't read a lot of their runs, but it is something where I'd be interested to know what like some really like deep in the comics Fantastic Four people would feel about like, oh, Thanos being their origin.
I mean, I read Fantastic Four, and for me, I just think that this film series needs to explain why they weren't relevant before, but it also needs to explain how in its genesis, in its first movie, it's not going to be like they said it's not going to be an origin story essentially. So, well, how do you establish these characters?
And that is kind of
That's kind of like the easiest way to do it.
And I feel like that's, as far as for the MCU as a whole, that is kind of one of the big things that they have to keep working on is like, well, why weren't they helping out before? Because that was like one of the big, or like they wrote it off for the Eternals where they were like, oh, well, why didn't you help out during the Thanos thing? And it's like, well, we're not supposed to interfere. And they, like, you have to address that anymore because we're going on, was it 15 years of the MCU and 30 movies?
Yeah, 30 movies or
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
it's like, it's such a huge world that they've built that if you're like, oh, this crazy, like, high-end superhero team
just
why
kind
weren't-
of appeared.
Yeah,
And with
why
this,
weren't
it's
you
like
there
built
in the-
into the mythos.
Yeah.
So what would you give it a letter grade? Like, let's say you're like a shitty substitute teacher.
I'd give that a B.
A B?
I'm like, yeah,
I thought
I'm
it
like-
was really good. I
Yeah,
but, hey,
I'm like, it's definitely, I've seen some other, like, a lot of, like, cooler theories for other properties in the MCU that one kind of scratches the itch, but it's by no means just average. Like, that's a pretty good way of going through and, like, figuring all that stuff out. I'm about it. If that is the path forward that they chose, I wouldn't be upset at it. I wouldn't turn my nose up
I think
at
it would be interesting if the quarantine thing's real, because then they can almost relate it to like our quarantines,
Yeah.
and if they are able
The
to
way
do that
we've all
effectively,
been trapped inside, and now they
that
can,
could be a really interesting way to write it. So this is one of my favorites. I'm gonna give it an A. I think
Okay,
it's a good one. All right, let's go with another theory. Okay,
yeah.
now this is the multiverse saga. What if it's just that the Fantastic Four were from another universe? Simple as that. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm torn. Part of me wants to say that's lazy writing.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me wants to say
It
that's
really depends on the
using
implementation.
Yeah,
Depends on how
it's-
they come about.
I would be split very 50-50 on that. It's going to come down to how they deliver it. Because it could just be like, oh, well, we've got multiverse, so somebody from the multiverse fell in. But that's also kind of how they added in, like, Miles into the 616 universe in the comics. Is they were like, oh, yeah, no, he was doing other stuff, and now the Secret Wars happened, and everything got smashed together, and now he's here. And it's like, that could be, depending on the way you go about writing it, it could be interesting, it could be done well. But at the same time, if they are just from another universe, why do they care about saving ours? And that was always one of the big things in the Secret Wars.
In this,
was-
it's the question of, will they just make all the multiverses converge into one universe? And if that's the goal of the MCU, I think that's going to be awful. But some people might really like that. So I don't know. For me, that theory's got a D-. I think that's lazy. But, it's so broad at the same time. That it could be implemented in a way that would totally shock me.
Exactly.
So
and I'm going to put it
we'll
at a
see.
C because it could either be an A or it could be an F. It all depends on how they implement that, because it could be as simple as they're like, oh, yeah, they were in another universe and then they fell into ours and now they're here. Or they could be like, oh, well, like a bit, like they could spin the time showing like how the multiverse is collapsing and how it forced them into our reality and doing something very cool with it and allowing that to be the storyline that they go with. Or if they had something, say, like they fell into our universe because they were chasing after Doctor Doom and they're trying to protect our universe from what their universe's Doctor Doom is trying to do to it. Something like that, where it's like, give them a reason to care about this universe other than just like, oh, they're here now and they're going to be, that's what heroes do, is they save universes. And it's like, yeah, but when a universe is going to destroy your universe if you fuck around too much, like, fuck that universe. You got people in your universe that you care about.
If someone wants to play a drinking game, just take a shot every single time he says universe there.
Yeah.
All right, we're moving on. I give that one a D-. You gave it a C.
Yeah.
All right. This one's called the Swinton Theory. All right. Now, if you
Tilda
remember,
Swinton?
that's indeed.
Okay.
All right. So, if you remember from Doctor Strange, the original one, as well as Endgame, Tilda Swinton obviously used to be the Sorcerer Supreme. Now, we also know that Tilda Swinton was not a conventional Sorcerer Supreme. She would dip into the dark arts. She would do whatever it took for the betterment of what she felt the universe needed. The question is, what if her and the Fantastic Four previously, before the events of all these things, came to an agreement when saving the world from something that we don't know, something we aren't aware of, because she made everyone forget in a similar way to that of Strange making everyone forget Spider-Man. So these superheroes are walking around in secrecy, having already saved the world once. But because they have this cosmic history, eventually someone from space comes after them, comes to Earth, and they have to reveal themselves for the heroes they are and the heroes they've been.
And I think that is kind of one of the that's an interesting way to do it.
It's interesting because they have so much Wong play right now. Like Wong is such a big deal in the universe, and there's such a disconnect because there's supposed to be a conversation between each Sorcerer Supreme, but he's a Sorcerer Supreme removed. So it would be believed that he would be lacking information that she needed to give him.
Yeah, and I think that the MCU right now is trying to set up their like 3 distinct levels of how any comic book universe really operates. You've got your street level, you've got your world, and then you've got your galactic. That's kind of how you have to break down the superheroes, because you can't have fucking Nova taking care of a mugging in New York. Otherwise, it's weird. It's like trying to solve a pillow fight with a grenade launcher or something ridiculous. And the Fantastic Four are one of those superhero teams that do dramatically jump between the levels. So I could see something where it's like, oh, there was some cosmic level shit,
and the thing that makes it
ready to handle.
More interesting too is they're Marvel's first family, right? So it's hard to explain, like, well, how can you call them the first family if these motherfuckers showed up last? They were here before, you just didn't know. That's an interesting concept. I just wonder how easily explainable that is, and like how they can make it, digestible.
There are definitely some potential drawbacks with that one, but I'm not mad at it. I'd give that a B+.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it like a B. I think it's a good one. The other one is that this is gonna be taken from the John Byrne run of the comics. So the John Byrne run is essentially the cosmic stuff of Fantastic Four, them being stuck on the dark side of space and having to fight off, more spectral villains and heroes. And people think that they're going to be introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy as a team of people that actually believe that the Earth was a long time gone while they've been traveling the cosmos, and they end up finding out that it's actually still there, so they return to Earth.
That could be interesting. Like if they got slingshot out into space, something happened where they got that,
and they've been
disconnect.
fighting people like Galactus or whoever.
I could find that fairly interesting. It would be neat to see them get their kind of like their start off world, and then like, because you do have it's usually one of those things where it's like, oh well, they start down here and then they kind of work their way up until they're dealing with,
it'd be interesting to have them work outward and then in.
Yeah, kind of like bringing themselves back and like trying to reestablish themselves, and like that would be, I think that could also be a really good like human narrative in that series, would be like trying to figure out, after dealing with all this cosmic shit, trying to figure out where you fit in the world and dealing with all the like everything that's happening in the world. Which also, so I kind of want to backpedal, because I know that I was dogging on them using Doctor Doom.
They're using Doctor Strange.
But he is one of the big impetuses for Secret Wars. So I could see them if they're wanting to be faithful to that storyline.
They don't care about that. They want to make good movies, and that's one of the things I've enjoyed about the Marvel stuff, is they're not as intent on keeping everything so close to the comics. So what would you rate that theory? Or what letter grade? Substitute teacher.
I'd give that one an A. I kind of like.
I like that one too. It's very broad. Also,
yeah.
I'm gonna give that one a B as well. I feel like I probably need to hear more about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this next theory is referred to online as charted in the 60s. Okay, so this is the quantum realm theory. It ties in with the 60. If you remember in Doctor Strange, when he sees John Krasinski's character, he says, "Hey, this is Reed Richards, member of the Fantastic Four." And Doctor Strange has a throwaway line, "Hey, I heard you guys charted in the 60s." Like, but people actually wonder if this is a reference in which there was a superhero group in the 60s called the Fantastic Four, and due to certain elements having to do with Reed trying to cure old Benny boy, they got stuck inside the quantum realm. And then when Ant-Man goes to fight Kang in the quantum realm in Quantumania, you kind of ask yourself, like, well, how can he survive Kang? Are they really going to kill Paul Rudd's character? There's a belief that he will run to the Fantastic Four and they will help him fend off Kang.
Huh.
And that will be the introduction. So then when Fantastic Four starts, you'll already have been introduced to the characters and they can just move along concurrently with the story, basically being the new out-of-time character since Captain America's, grown old. It's like now we're dealing with a bunch of people who were alive and well in the 60s, and now they're walking around like normal people in the 2020s.
I'd be interested to see that because they have been trying to do...
That would also retroactively make them the first family, being that they'd be only the second superhero group ever after Captain America.
Mm-hmm. I'm not mad at that one because they have been doing a lot of stuff where they try to, even if it's quickly introduce somebody in another movie or show or whatever, to kind of like quickly be like, hey, here's who this character is. They kind of pop up here so that when they come up later, like, don't be surprised. Like Agatha Harkness, or to a larger extent, America Chavez and Multiverse was like, they go through and they're kind of introducing these other like heavy hitters from the comics into the movies, and that kind of lessens the need for an origin story because they either get a quick like little bit of exposition in whatever they're being introduced into, or they kind of are able to just like, it makes audiences aware of them. I don't know necessarily that people need to be made aware of the Fantastic Four. They're kind of they might not be as household of a name as Spider-Man, but it's still Fantastic Four. Like, it is, they're the first family in comics, which stuff like comic book nerds like me and you know about. But like, if I was like, oh, like, hey, like,
I think Fantastic Four, even though the movies have just been terrible, I feel like that's a well-known name.
It is a well-known name.
Even for people who don't read the comics. Yeah. So I think it's a recognizable name.
If I called up my grandparents and I was like, name a superhero, they're probably going to say Spider-Man, Batman, Superman.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be one of those. Fantastic Four is not going to be on the tip of their tongue, but it's still like, if I said, Fantastic Four, they're going to, oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah, they're like the human fire guy.
Yeah. Like, people know the Fantastic Four, so I don't know that they need a setup movie, but I do think if they're going to use that as a setup, that's a pretty good springboard.
All right, this is the last one. Okay, first, give me a grade on that one.
I'll give that a B. I'll give that a B minus.
I give that, dude, I'm gonna give that like an A minus, and mainly the reason being, you can have them look, act, and everything just like the Fantastic Four characters from the comics in that way. Like, you can vibe with their ridiculous names. You don't have to retroactively explain it by having Chris Evans be like, that guy, I'm the Human Torch, and that guy, he's Mr. Fantastic because his wang get real big. That's how the original movies explained their names, like Chris Evans just throwing names out. And it's because they're a little goofy. So, I don't know if somebody would call themselves the Thing in 2020. So by making it the 60s, well, then they really didn't control their narrative. People said things about them for themselves. And it also explains they're just like Reed Richards is supposed to be one of the smartest people on the planet. And he just has had no relevancy up to then. So I'm going to give it like an A minus.
Yeah.
All right, this one's the last one. This one got popular on Facebook. It's entitled Reed's Guilt. Okay?
Reed does some bad shit when he's feeling guilty, so I'm excited to hear this.
And I'm quoting directly, okay? Reed feels an immense guilt for what he's done to his loved ones, especially his best friend Ben. They've had their powers this whole time. They got them around the time of the Soviet Accords, but considering the anti-superhero rhetoric, they've been trying to control their power secretly in isolation so they can walk around as everyday people, basically doing a play on COVID isolation as they're all being forced to get along and all that stuff. Eventually, Johnny tears off the Band-Aid in a stubborn rage and tries to save someone, and as a result, the Fantastic Four are forced out into the open.
That's interesting. That's a concept. That's a thing. It feels kind of like a much greater version of the first theory, but like really playing on like the Sokovia Accords, which I feel like some people at this point like were far enough removed from the Sokovia Accords that
which would
forget
explain
that,
why Johnny also would be like, fuck this, everybody's back to doing what they want, like we need to fucking go. And Reed's like, no, my friend's still a rock.
And it's definitely like Reed Richards is the type of person to like kind of go a little mad scientist and like fully lock them the fuck down. So I feel like if you really lean into that side of Reed Richards, you could pull it off fairly well. So I'd be interested in that one. I just feel like that's a long time to be able to control Johnny for.
Well, it all depends on what, like I said, I'm not trying to make sense of the theory because it could be totally untrue and mean nothing. It is interesting though when you consider like that did happen, and it's like the first thing in my opinion that would make sense out of everybody agreeing to not being out in the open.
Yeah.
Like, why would Johnny want to come out and be in the open if he thinks he's going to instantly like go to prison?
Yeah.
So that almost makes sense. I feel like it gives a better reason for why they'd all agree to it. But for me, it's like a B-. I think it's an interesting one though.
C. I liked it. I liked it about as much as the first one, but the first one like being with the blip as being their kind of starting event versus the Sokovia Accords. That's like the Sokovia Accords. That's almost in universe. So there's 5 years from the blip, and then there's like another.
The Sokovia Accords took place in 2015.
Okay, so that's almost 10 years
to
have him locked down, and Johnny is...
Which would explain the division between them two, though.
Yeah.
Explain why they'd be fighting all the time. Why and the other thing is they have to organically explain why the Flaming Torch is a dick to the Thing. But when you put in the context of I've been stuck in a box with you for 10 years, now it's starting to make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't know. It could totally be that.
But also that could be shown as like the 5-year gap. And I feel like it's a lot more reasonable to be able to hold Johnny in for 5 years versus a decade. Like Johnny can be a bit of an asshole. And like even at Richard's best, he's got a hard time like locking Johnny's shit down. So I just feel like it would be so weird for that long of a gap to go. But yeah, it really, I'd say C. I'd say I give that one a C. So they've got.
So I have one I want to say.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
All right, this one, don't take it too seriously. And also, this is being recorded on September 5th. So if somehow the cast has come out, ignore this part and move on. So John Krasinski has been on the late night shows and he's been asked about Fantastic Four. And if you know like production and like you follow film news and stuff like that, you know one thing definitively. If someone doesn't have a job, they'll tell you they don't have it. And John Krasinski just likes to dance around him being in this Fantastic Four movie so much that it's building hype around him possibly being Reed Richards, which means one of two things. He either is Reed Richards or he's being an asshole to whoever is going to be Reed Richards, because that person has to live up to all this hype. But then I started thinking, and what if there's a third really stupid option that I don't actually believe, but there's a part of me that really wants to? What if John Krasinski is in Fantastic Four, but what if he's Doctor Doom and not Reed Richards?
I would...
I mean, come on, there's so many differentiations between universes. Why couldn't he easily play Doctor Doom?
That's a fun theory to me. I would love that.
Because otherwise he's just being an asshole if he's not Reed Richards.
I think the fact that he was in Multiverse of Madness.
That's what makes me believe it's not him. Because when Kevin Feige was talking about John Krasinski being in it, he said things like, "Oh, it was really good to like give that to the fans and like give them the Reed Richards that they had been asking for." Essentially, kind of making it sound like, but that's not what you're gonna fucking get.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then why is John playing so coy?
Maybe it's like a contract thing. Maybe it was like, oh, hey, like you're in the multiverse thing.
What kind of contract would that be?
Technically, he has played Reed Richards in the MCU.
Yeah, but when he's asked about whether he'd be in Fantastic Four or not, he dances around it like a little bitch baby and doesn't say anything. So it makes me think.
I think that he's got to be in it.
He's got it, but what if he's not Reed Richards? What if he's Dr. Doom?
That would be an interesting way to run it. I wouldn't be mad at it. I would be very open to the idea of him playing Dr. Doom or something like that, where it's just like, hey, here's this thing, turn it on its ear. Like, let's just get really fucking weird with it. So yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens out of that. But that's such a
bad
dangerous take, and I don't know that the MCU would go for it.
I mean, I suppose we'll see, because it could be that we find out in universe, the one that we saw, that Fantastic Four. How do we know that that isn't just Dr. Doom playing as Reed Richards?
As Reed Richards in that.
Yeah, and he's the one who he was able to mimic the same power and basically live his life as Reed.
Be interesting.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
And if it's Penn Bagley or whatever, that'll be cool too. I'm honestly, if it's Jason Segel is the thing, I don't care. You guys might know already, you might not. But regardless of whether you know or not, leave down your fan theories in the comments below. Let us know cool fan theories that you've heard about.
I'm gonna go through and read all of them.
Because you know, like, we're definitely interested. We just talked about a bunch of bullshit we read on the internet. We would love to read your bullshit too. And make sure to like, subscribe, keep up with us about all of the different movie talks we have, all the different comic book talks. If you're a fan of horror, we do that on this channel too. So check us out. Also, Zane streams, I guess. Peace out.